Welcome to a world where love, loyalty, and trust are never what they seem. Here, every story begins with an unexpected encounter, an arrival that feels like a new beginning but unravels into betrayal. Hidden within secret notes and whispered lies, a husband's double life is exposed, revealing dangerous liaisons and passions he thought would stay buried. But the lies don't stop there. Families get entangled, alliances shift, and grudges passed down through blood ignite into explosive drama. Each truth uncovered turns sacred promises into weapons, bleeding raw emotions across every page of loyalty, love, and deceit. From pain is born the path to revenge, carefully crafted to dismantle illusions and force the betrayer to taste despair. And in the end comes the reckoning, sorrow, justice, and liberation etched into unforgettable family stories. If you crave twists that cut deep and secrets that won't stay hidden, you've just found your new home. The plane touched down on the damp runway, and the familiar gray skyline stretched across the horizon like a somber painting. London had always carried a sense of new beginnings, a place where dreams could be reset and burdens left behind. But the air that morning felt heavier than expected, as though the city already knew a secret I had yet to discover. The footsteps through the terminal echoed with anticipation, but beneath it ran an unsettling current I couldn't name. Outside, the city buzzed with its usual rhythm, black cabs sliding past, hurried strangers brushing shoulders, raindrops dotting the pavement. Just as the thought of freedom began to take root, a figure stepped forward from the crowd. His presence was deliberate, his eyes fixed with unsettling precision. There was no introduction, no explanation. Only a folded piece of paper pressed into waiting hands, as though the weight of the world had just been transferred in that quiet gesture. The envelope was worn, the handwriting unmistakable. The very sight of it unraveled the fragile belief that everything was as it seemed. Each curve of ink bore the signature of a husband's touch, yet something about it felt wrong, too urgent, too cryptic. With trembling fingers, the seal broke, releasing words that struck harder than any physical blow. The message was short, but every line dripped with betrayal. Names of places I'd never heard before. Times etched in secrecy, and at the end, an admission no spouse should ever read, cloaked in careless confession. Evidence of love whispered to someone else, love that was never meant to be shared. The world tilted, as if the ground itself had rejected the cruelty of what those words revealed. Around the edges of the note were details impossible to ignore. An address scribbled hastily, a date underlined twice. It wasn't the handwriting of a man protecting his family. It was the scrawl of someone caught between guilt and reckless desire. The stranger who delivered it had already vanished into the crowd, leaving behind only questions that burned hotter with every passing second. The cold air seeped through, yet it was nothing compared to the chill inside. Each heartbeat carried fragments of disbelief, images of nights replayed under false pretenses, of words whispered in love that now felt hollow. How many lies had been spoken in the same voice that once promised forever? How many vows had been shattered long before this moment in London? The city lights flickered against wet streets as the note slipped back into trembling hands. What had begun as a promise of renewal had transformed into a battlefield of emotions. Betrayal thick as fog, anger sharp as glass, and the first stirrings of vengeance curling in the shadows of thought. The journey had only just begun, and already the seeds of destruction were planted. The note was no message of love. It was the first confession of war. The note stayed folded in a coat pocket for hours, its weight pressing like a stone against the ribs, as if it had a pulse of its own. Curiosity warred with dread, but eventually the paper was unfolded again, every word examined in a desperate attempt to make sense of them. The message wasn't just careless scribbles. It was a doorway into another life, one meticulously built behind closed doors, hidden from the very world that was meant to know him best. The handwriting carried the familiarity of countless birthday cards, holiday letters, and whispered promises, yet the meaning twisted each memory into something grotesque. He spoke of meetings in secret apartments, of wine, stained nights spent in the arms of someone else. The words painted vivid pictures of intimacy once thought sacred, now shared recklessly with another. It was not a single mistake, not a fleeting lapse. It was a life lived in shadows, where every stolen moment was a dagger driven deeper into the trust that had once held everything together. The address scrawled across the bottom of the note led to a part of London not known for romance but for anonymity, a neighborhood where curtains stayed drawn and neighbors asked no questions. It was the perfect setting for a man who balanced two worlds with calculated precision. One world of family, respectability, and duty, and another fueled by forbidden passions, dangerous liaisons, and the thrill of deception. A truth like this doesn't arrive gently. It slams into the chest with brutal force, breaking apart every certainty. The vows spoken on a wedding day echoed hollow now, each word exposed as nothing more than a performance. The hand once kissed with tenderness was the same that signed hotel registers under false names, the same that reached for someone else in the darkness. As the reality unfolded, it became impossible to ignore the signs that had been brushed aside in the past. Late night calls abruptly ended when footsteps approached. Business trips extended without explanation. The sudden coldness that lingered after returning home. Every suspicion once silenced now roared back with sharp clarity, proving that the lies had not begun yesterday, but had been cultivated carefully over years. The pain cut deeper not only because of the betrayal itself, but because of the audacity with which it had been lived. To walk through the same front door with a smile after living such a life elsewhere required a coldness few could imagine. The kind of coldness that turns love into nothing but a weapon, used to keep suspicion asleep while deception thrives. The letter no longer felt like paper. It became evidence of the man behind the mask, evidence of the secret existence that had stolen years and poisoned every tender memory. It was the mirror that reflected his true face, a face built on lies, lust, and betrayal. And in that moment, the man once loved became a stranger who deserved nothing but ruin. The note was only the beginning, a spark that set fire to everything once believed about family. At first, it seemed to reveal nothing more than a husband's infidelity, a wound deep enough to tear a heart in two. But the more the words were studied, the more they unraveled threads that connected to something far darker. It wasn't only about stolen kisses and hidden apartments. It was about a web carefully spun, involving people far closer than any outsider should have been. The handwriting hinted at names that weren't strangers. One was an in-law, someone who had sat at the same table, shared meals, exchanged smiles filled with venom disguised as affection. Another was a family friend who had always lingered too long in conversations, whose laughter carried a note of familiarity that now sounded like mockery. The realization settled like poison. The betrayal didn't just belong to him. It was stitched into the fabric of the family itself. Memories clawed back, arguments that never made sense, sudden hostility from relatives, whispered words that stopped when footsteps entered the room. What once seemed like harmless tension now revealed itself as strategy. An entire household guarding secrets, while one woman stood blind in the center. The grudges weren't petty after all. They were the residue of jealousy, competition, and carefully concealed knowledge of the double life that was being lived in plain sight. The note dragged every unspoken truth into the light. His sister, the one who insisted no one was good enough for him, suddenly made sense. Her contempt hadn't been about loyalty. It had been about protecting the lies she already knew. His mother's coldness, masked as tradition and pride, now burned with a new clarity. She wasn't distant, she was complicit. To watch her son deceive and remain silent was to weave herself into the very heart of the betrayal. The family gatherings replayed like cruel theater. The laughter around the dinner table, stories shared with apparent warmth, all while secrets pulsed beneath the surface. Each toast was a lie, each smile a performance, every hug a cover for betrayal. It was a play where everyone knew their lines, everyone but the one who trusted too deeply. The anger that followed wasn't only for the man who strayed. It spread like wildfire to those who chose silence over truth. those who preferred to watch the destruction unfold rather than stop it. Their loyalty had never been to family, but to secrecy. Their love was never real. It was convenience, built on the foundation of betrayal. The note was no longer just a message from a cheating husband. It was a mirror reflecting an entire family's corruption, a legacy of lies protected by blood ties and shameless deceit. And in that reflection, one truth became undeniable. They had all chosen their side, and none of them would escape the reckoning to come. The truth didn't come all at once. It broke in fragments, sharp edges cutting deeper each time another piece fell into place. At first, it was disbelief, a desperate clinging to the idea that love couldn't be counterfeit. But the more secrets came to light, the more the heart split open, bleeding with every revelation that confirmed how wrong it had been to trust so blindly. The note was only the opening wound. What followed were whispers uncovered in hidden messages, financial records tucked away where no eyes were meant to see, and faces of women who had shared what should have been sacred. The man who once whispered forever had built an empire of lies, each one more elaborate than the last. The smile that had once felt safe now replayed like a cruel joke, a mask worn to cover a life lived without loyalty. It wasn't just about infidelity. It was about the shattering of everything built together. Promises of devotion had been traded for empty thrills, the kind of passion that rotted the soul. Each discovery stripped away another layer of what once felt like home until nothing remained but a battlefield littered with fragments of love, respect, and trust. The vows spoken on a wedding day no longer carried meaning. They were broken words, left to decay in the shadow of his deceit. The emotions came in waves. Anger burned first, hot and consuming, demanding to know how someone could destroy so much with such ease. Then sorrow followed, heavy and suffocating, pressing against the chest until it was hard to breathe. But the most dangerous feeling of all was clarity, the realization that every lie uncovered wasn't just a betrayal of love, but of dignity, of years wasted on someone unworthy. The family, once thought of as allies, proved themselves accomplices. Their silence spoke louder than any confession. They had known, or at least suspected, and still chose to watch the charade play out. It wasn't just a husband who betrayed. It was a family that protected betrayal, a bloodline built on secrets rather than honesty. That truth bled deeper than anything else because it meant the betrayal was never accidental. It was cultivated, guarded, and fed until it thrived. Each painful discovery carved the path forward. There was no way back to innocence, no possibility of pretending that love could survive such carnage. Every truth ripped away the illusions, leaving behind only raw resolve. The battlefield had been chosen not by the betrayed, but by the betrayer. And if war was what he wanted, war was what he would receive. The love once cherished was gone, and in its place grew something colder, sharper, and far more enduring. The lies had shattered everything, but in their ruins, vengeance was born. The note shifted from being a rupture in trust to a map of undoing, each line a coordinate to the hidden life that had to be dismantled. At first, the paper felt like a curse, proof of betrayal that refused to be unread. But slowly that sting turned into a tool. Every secret address, every underlined hour, every careless admission became a breadcrumb leading straight into the heart of a double life. Where heartbreak carved a hollow, strategy grew, cold and precise. Silence became an ally, while the rest of the world assumed confusion and retreat. Quiet investigation threaded together the truth with surgical clarity. Phone records were traced, small transactions followed to anonymous accounts, and faces mentioned in that cramped handwriting were researched until their stories lined up like tiles in a mosaic. The husband's laughter, once misconstrued for warmth, now sounded like an admission, echoing in hotel lobbies, behind locked doors, and beneath the hush of late-night rendezvous. Each discovery peeled back a layer of performance and exposed the choreography of deceit. There was art to this dismantling. Rumors were not spread. They were strategically placed where they could not be ignored. A whisper here to a business partner, a carefully timed email to a family member who had always turned away, a printed receipt left where it would provoke questions. The aim was never petty revenge for revenge's sake. It was a methodical demolition of illusion. Reputation, that fragile currency, was targeted with careful strikes that would make the lies impossible to hide. The man who had lived 2 lives would find both lives collapsing under the weight of truth. Anger drove the first moves, but restraint shaped the plan. Every impulsive act that could be used as proof was avoided. Instead, patience became the fiercest weapon, waiting until the right presence was at the right place, until a lie could be documented beyond denial. Allies were gathered quietly, a former friend betrayed by similar promises, a neighbor who remembered late night visitors, a clerk who could place a name at a date and time. Together, they formed a ledger of indisputable evidence. The note itself was turned into a symbol of reckoning. Copies found their way into hands that had once protected the deceit. Questions were asked in family rooms that had long been suffocated by pretense. Boardroom whispers spread where business could no longer be kept separate from personal ruin. The husband's world began to leak at the seams. Appointments canceled, messages unanswered, the polite smiles replaced by a practiced dryness as everyone waited to see how far the collapse would go. Cowardice met consequence. The very secrets that had given him thrills now isolated him. Lovers retreated when exposed. Companions shrank from scandal. And relatives who once shielded him changed their sides with the cold efficiency of survival. It wasn't enough to accuse. The goal was to leave no refuge, to ensure every avenue of escape closed until despair was the only thing left to inherit. What began as a simple folded note became the instrument that reclaimed dignity, piece by painful piece. Let him taste the emptiness he dealt out so freely. The storm built slowly, fed by every lie uncovered, every smirk disguised as love, every silence from a family that had chosen loyalty to secrets over truth. By the time the final confrontation arrived, the anger had cooled into something sharper than rage. It wasn't chaos that guided the reckoning, but precision. Every piece had been moved into place. Every mask was ready to be torn off. It began in the home that once held laughter, the walls now echoing with the weight of betrayal. Evidence waited on the table. Receipts, photographs, messages, the note that had started it all. One by one, the lies were read aloud, each word stripping away another layer of false dignity. The husband's face shifted from denial to fury to despair, a progression that revealed the coward beneath the bravado. His voice, once commanding, cracked against the truth until there was nothing left but silence. But it wasn't only his silence that mattered. The family who had stood as silent witnesses were called into the light of accountability. The sister who sneered, the mother who protected, the relatives who looked away. All faced the evidence they could no longer deny. Their excuses dissolved like ash in the wind. The alliances that once guarded him fractured, exposing the hollowness of their loyalty. What had been unity was now disgrace, their own roles in the deception leaving them powerless to defend him. Justice came not through violence but through exposure. Friends learned the truth. Business partners withdrew their trust. The community that once admired the picture of respectability saw the cracks and turned their gaze away. He had built a life on appearances, and appearances were the very thing stripped from him, piece by piece. Reputation, pride, authority. Each was reduced to rubble, yet the reckoning was not only his. It was a liberation from years of manipulation, from words that bound tighter than chains, from a love that had never been real. The sorrow of loss turned into the strength of release, and the battlefield of lies became the birthplace of freedom. What he left behind was nothing more than a ruin, a reminder of what deceit always costs when it finally collapses. The family name would carry the scars of this betrayal, etched deep into memory, retold as a warning, never forgotten. But within the ashes lay the beginning of something stronger than vengeance, the unbreakable truth that no chain of lies, no matter how carefully woven, can hold forever. The final reckoning was not his destruction alone. It was the restoration of everything he tried to take. And he was left to choke on the silence of his own ruin. Thanks for watching another story where betrayal, secrets, and family drama collide. Every twist we share is a reminder that truth always finds its way to the surface, no matter how deep it's buried. If this story kept you hooked, imagine what's coming next. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss a revelation. More shocking betrayals, hidden lies, and unforgettable reckonings are waiting. Stay tuned, because the next secret might be darker than the last.